I've got a 1973 XL-175 gas tank here. It's in excellent condition. My dad was the original owner. It sat for most of my childhood, and just working on getting it running again. And it's clogged up with more than likely rust flakes from the gas tank. I don't see any perforations, so what we're going to do, trying to take the petcock off to get inside and just start cleaning the tank up. And the Phillips screw that attaches on the 73, later years they had a different attaching method, but on the 73 it goes straight through underneath the fuel filter screen here, and it's just completely stripped out. So I'm going to attempt to drill the head off of it, pop the petcock off, and then hopefully I can get some Corrosion X or some Coroil or something down, and then get the bolt out without having to drill and tap. I'm hoping I can just thread it out of there. So I thought the video might be helpful. After that, I'm going to clean the tank up a bit. I'm going to put some Evaporust in there, and I'll show you the method I use to clean tanks up. I don't use tank sealant unless I absolutely have to. I don't like tank sealant. I've seen it fail and cause more damage than, do more harm than good. So let's see if we can get this bolt head out of here and go from there. I got pretty lucky on that guy. I'd already started it a little bit with this bit. My first guess was a 7/32, and it appears to have done a really nice job of just taking the head off of that guy. So from there, see if we can get the petcock maybe seized up on the shaft a little bit. I don't want to damage the tank, so we're just going to be careful here. There we go. So, as you can see, there's loads of gunk and rust. And possibly some failed tank sealant. I'm hoping this is just really nasty gelled fuel. So now we just got to see if we can get the rest of this bolt out without causing any damage to the tank or the flange. And then we'll go on about seeing what we can do about the rust situation, and finding out, of course, how solid the rest of the tank is. Again, it looks great. Be hard pressed to find a better looking tank. It does appear here to have a little bit of a weld, so maybe lead. It may have been an older repair. I don't know. It's pretty strange. But we'll find out what it looks like inside a little bit down the road here. We want to get this as tight as we can the first time, so it'll bite into the threads nicely. Otherwise, we'll just end up rounding this off, and I really don't want to have to drill this guy out. It's spinning pretty nicely, so I think we're in good shape. This head could have been stripped out for 30 years, for all I know. My dad had dropped it off and had some backyard mechanic work on it when I was a young man. Now at this point I am not doing a full restoration on this bike. I'm just cleaning it up and getting it running. It's going to be at a family property to ride around. So I'm going to be hard pressed not to do a full restoration on it. It's in beautiful shape and we're the original owners of the bike. But I'm still going to clean up this tank pretty nicely. I'll probably buff the outside a bit and see how nice I can get it looking, and it'll be one less thing to do down the road. So I've got some Evaporust here. You can buy this at most automotive stores, AutoZone, Advance. I've used a few different products and this has worked really well. I've done a few Trail 90 gas tanks with it and it gets it really clean. And again, for me, the best gas tank is a clean gas tank with fuel in it. I don't want any kind of sealant. I've used Pour 15 products. I've seen all kinds of tank sealants fail. If you have a nearly perforated tank and you have no other choice, then it's an option. But if you have a Survivor good condition tank with lots of metal in it, I start with the Evaporust and see if I can just have a clean tank. We've got this petcock off, and in order for this to seal, I'm just going to go ahead and screw this petcock back on, find a donor screw and put it on temporarily. One of the things I'm seeing in here that's odd is it looks like somebody has sealed it with, who knows, caulking or silicone or something silly, and there's no O-ring in there. So again, somebody else has been in here in the past. So we'll hope it seals up enough to hold the Evaporust for me. And I'll be, of course, ordering a rebuild kit. The fuel screen looks terrible. And it's no wonder it wasn't running well, or at all at the end there. Luckily, we happen to have a perfect donor screw sitting right here, so I'm just going to screw this petcock back on for the moment to hold it while we get some Evaporust in there. I don't know if it's going to seal with that failed silicone crud on it, but we'll see what it does. The fact that that bolt threaded out without major hoopla is good for us, because that speaks well for the condition of the inside of the tank. I'm not sure if there's any way you'd be able to see the inside of this tank here without some good lighting. But I'm going to see if I can get a good angle. Decent angle there. You can see I've seen a lot worse, but it's also not great. So we'll get that Evaporust in there and shake it around. I like to count a number of nuts and bolts and leftover parts so that I make sure I get them all out and shake the tank around real well. After I get the Evaporust in there, try to loosen up some of the crud. You can reuse this stuff. So I'm just going to dump the whole, about half a jug I had left in here. It's about, say it was about $8 last time I bought it. It's probably 20 now. This will also be telling for us to see if there are any perforations in the tank. I sandblasted and did an awful lot of work on a CT90 tank only to find out that it was perforated, just tiny holes you couldn't see. On really bad tanks I've had before, I've ramped them in a small blanket, taped them up into a big ball, and thrown them in the dryer for 90 minutes or sometimes longer. And the agitation with some handful of loose nuts in there just gets a spotless tank. It worked really well for me. I'm not immediately seeing any Evaporust leaking out onto the towel I've got here, so that's a good sign. I'm going to let that stuff do its thing for days. In the meantime, like I said, I'll count some nuts and put them in there, and I'll come out and shake this thing anytime I get a chance. I've got here some new stainless hardware, but it's not going to do any damage to the hardware, so I'll just clean it off when I get it out. But I've got 5 3/8 stainless nuts. Now that I've got this video, I don't have to write it down. I've got a bunch of stainless lag bolts. I'm going to do 10 of those. Yeah, maybe 15. Making an even 20 items in there. After a bit of time, we'll see how this looks, and if we need to, we will employ the drier tumbling trick. I'm just knocking the dust off here. Do a good inspection of the tank, find out what parts I need to order. You just see the condition this tank's in. It's just beautiful. Not gonna find one like this on eBay. It'd be hard pressed, and it would cost a fortune. No dents. It's got a couple of scratches and normal wear up top, but it's just a beautiful tank. Paint doesn't hold up like this anymore. I'd have to buy a donor tank and do some work on it and then spray it to get it looking this good. This is just McGuire's mist and wipe. Just to get the dust off. Well, this thing is in beautiful shape. I went in thinking I was going to need to replace the petcock, but it looks great. So just to assess what I'm going to need to order, I'm going to pull the lever off the petcock and see what we got going on in there. As long as the casting for this body is in good usable condition, then all I'll need is a petcock rebuild kit, some seals, new fuel line, carb kit. Should be good to go. This seal is completely trashed. I don't really want to destroy it because I would like to have the tank sealed while I'm doing the Evaporust, so I'm going to leave it in there for the moment. I'd like to see what it looks like underneath there, but nothing's bad enough that I'm worried about it, the condition underneath, so just going to reassemble it until we're ready. Important thing is the body looks good and none of the screws are overly stripped, although they don't look great. It's already looking a lot better in there. I think there's a good chance I'm going to wrap this one up and put it in the dryer. I'll just have to see what it looks like overnight. Luckily, I've got no timeline, so this can take days if it needs to. So I'm going to let this sit. I'm going to agitate it periodically. And I will report back after this Evaporust has had some time to do its thing. Alright, it's been 24 hours and I've been shaking this thing periodically and it's looking great. The Evaporust down there is very much this brown sludge. Now, I've got enough rust in here that there's still a lot of particulates that are stuck to the metal, so the Evaporust is not going to dissolve that and take it off. So I'd like a little more agitation, so I have decided to go ahead and employ the drying, putting it in the dryer trick. I've added 15 more small lag bolts I had lying about, stainless ones. So I've got a total of 35 pieces of hardware in here to roll around and agitate. I'm going to wrap it in a plastic bag to not upset the wife in case some Evaporust leaks out of here, and then I'm going to tape it up in a moving blanket I have laying around. So, and we'll run that for probably 90 minutes and see how it comes out. I've done this once or twice in the past and it's turned out really nicely, so let's go ahead and do it before the wife gets home. This won't be waterproof, but it should stop the bulk of the mess, if anything, with any minor leaks. This isn't something you'd want to set on for 90 minutes and then walk away or leave for work, because if this thing somehow came untaped and escaped your blanket, you would make quite a bit of damage to your tank and possibly your dryer of less consequence. Now this one moving blanket's not as much padding as I'd like. You do want it agitating, but you don't want it banging in there. You're also going to, of course, turn the heat off or down low on your dryer. You don't need any heat. This is like using an orbital sander. It's going to replicate thousands of my shaking motions, more than I'm going to be willing to do. Standing in the garage, we'll find another blanket to get around that, and then we should be good to go. Alright, if you haven't done this before, I know it looks kind of comical, but I've taped it up in a comforter inside that it's in another blanket and then in some bags. So hopefully it won't do any damage to the comforter because I'll get in trouble. So from here we're going to put it in the dryer with low or no heat and give it some time. Alright, it's making a bit of racket in there, but being in a big comforter like this, it's not making the machine bounce around or anything, so we're going to crank it up and let it go for a while. Heat's on low. Just a bit of thumping. If it gets much louder, we'll pull it out. Alright, I got an update on the tank. I had this in the dryer for only about 10 or 15 minutes. I just didn't have enough blankets and it was banging around and I was worried about damage to the tank, so I took it out. Even in that 10 or 15 minutes, it did a really good job of agitating the leftover sludge. So right now I have rinsed it. Evaporust can be poured down the drain or put out, dumped outside or whatever. It's environmentally safe as long as you didn't have a bunch of gas in your tank before, and depending on the iron and stuff that comes out of it, but overall safe to dispose of. So I've been flushing this with water, and if you rewind the video and look at what we were dealing with earlier, there's still some water inside here, so I can get a good angle. But we've got some clean metal in there now. We still got a little bit of rust, and this is of course going to flash rust, but look down in there. There's some large particles and some stuff on the top here I haven't been able to get yet. I may do the dryer one more time with some more Evaporust. At this point, if I rinsed it real well and it's ready for gas, I mean, it looks great. It looks better than some of my bikes that I'm still riding. But I've got no timeline, as I mentioned earlier, so I'm probably going to put a little bit more time into this. You can see just around the filler neck how much of that rust came off, and the fact that we're just down to clean metal. Same with the cap, although the cap gets covered in sludge every time I shake it. It's really, Evaporust is really an impressive product, and especially being able to be disposed of like that, it's good stuff. So I'm going to keep working on this a little bit more. I ordered a carb rebuild kit and a petcock rebuild kit and a few other things for this bike and a battery. The bike's actually up in Tennessee, and I'll be taking this up there to put it back together and hopefully get it running here in probably a month or two. So that's where we are now. I will update when I finish whatever I end up doing to treat the last bit of this rust in the tank. So that's all for now. Alright, I've done a few more rinses. I put another handful of some large half-inch washers in here and shook it around really well. I don't think I need to do any more. I certainly could. Another round of Evaporust and some more shaking, and certainly some time in the dryer. I've honestly had the 90 minutes in the dryer get these looking brand new. I mean, incredible inside, like you sandblasted it. But there is no more rust. There's no more chunks of anything left in there. It's just got kind of a mottled appearance because of the discoloration and leftover stuff. So if I get a borescope in there, I'll get a better picture and put it on here, but it looks really good. I've cleaned up the area where the petcock mounts. I got a new O-ring coming for that. And there's no sludge left down here by the petcock. Now if you put a paper towel in there and wipe it, there's still a film in here. It's not spotless. You could probably shake it with some kerosene or something if you wanted to. I don't need any more haz waste to dispose of. I think everything in here is going to dissolve in the fuel just fine and, get burned through the engine or what have you. I may rinse it once or twice more, I don't know. But right now I'm going to hit it with a heat gun to dry it off so it doesn't flash rust. It's pretty cool here right now and the humidity's fairly low, but I don't need any help from nature with what we've cleaned up here. So after some heat gun, it's relatively dry, and you can get a better look at how clean it is. Still not a beautiful view, but it's a very usable tank. And we can see how clean that is down there. Again, I would urge you to consider not using a tank sealer if you don't absolutely have to. I've seen people use tank sealers on tanks that look better than this, and think of a failed paint system on the exterior of a vehicle that you prepped well, and then consider the inside of the gas tank that you cannot prep well. No matter what you do, it's not going to be truly ready to accept any kind of a epoxy sealant system. You're essentially putting a bag of epoxy in there around the tank. It's just, you're going to hear a lot of differing opinions on it, but that's mine. So if you don't have a perforated tank that's unsalvageable, I would not use any kind of a sealant system on it. You put as much or as little time into these as you want to get it cleaned up. If you've got a good fuel filter in line, I mean, you can just keep running it and changing the fuel filter. This tank would probably fetch $500 on eBay, and it's in really great shape. And of course, it's the original tank to the bike I'm working on, so it's priceless to me. So I have no timeline. I may do one more round of Evaporust just to get it looking really nice, but it's going to be doing a lot of sitting in Tennessee too, so I have to constantly fight the urge not to do a concours restoration on this thing. So anyway, that's where we are right now. I'll update when I get some of the parts in and finish up on it. I've decided to call the tank good. Once I got it dried out, it looked really nice, so there's no point in going any further. I've sprayed it with wool wax, which is a fluid film. If you want to get it on Amazon, it's just a corrosion preventative. It's inexpensive, and that'll keep the tank from any flash rust until I get it on the bike, and then it'll burn with the fuel. So now I'm going to rebuild this petcock and get everything taken apart and ready for rebuild kit when it gets here. I imagine I'll do a separate video on the petcock and the carb rebuild if anybody wants to see it. This video is really dedicated to kind of getting the inside of that tank degunked and ready for fuel. So if you've got anything else you want to see on an XL-175 that's just been sitting for a long time, let me know in the comments, and I'm going to leave it at that. Hope this helps somebody.